Welcome to Basic Black. Some of you are joining us on our broadcast and others of you are joining us on our digital platforms. I'm Phillip Martin, Senior Investigative Reporter, GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting. Callie Crosley has the night off. Tonight, DEI. Shortly after the murder of George Floyd and the racial unrest that followed around the country, companies and organizations examined their diversity and equity practices in the workplace. Job ads were posted searching for diversity experts. But 3 years later, employees in those jobs have either left out of frustration or were laid off. Has the moment for diversity, equity, and inclusion passed? Joining us this evening, Felicia Jadczak, co-founder, co-CEO, and head of DEI programming at She Geeks Out. Dr. Nefertiti Walker, Vice Chancellor for Equity and Inclusion, UMass Amherst. And Dr. Anouska Bhattacharyya, Vice President of Programs, YW Boston. Also with us, Kim Dukes, Managing Director, Koya Partners. Diversified Search Group. Welcome to all of you, and I hope I got all of your names right.
Fantastic job.
DEI, that's the acronym, of course, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And it's become a catch term, either good or bad, in the public imagination. And one of the most I guess, extraordinary things about this issue is it is polarizing. But Dr. Dukes, it's also not well defined. Can you tell us what it is, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why you think it's become a lightning rod?
Well, what I think is interesting, and thank you for the doctor, but not quite there.
Okay.
I think what's interesting about it is that diversity is defined by where an organization is in their journey. Because this is about a journey. Mm-hmm. And some organizations are at the beginning, nobody's at the end, because it's a moving target. And it depends on what you're doing, where you are in this systemic structural journey. And it has to be identified by the goals of the organization.
But when we talk about DEI, let's just use the short term for it. We're talking about not just race, we're talking about any number of factors in this context. We're talking about gender, we're talking about people who are differently abled. But for a lot of people, since 2020, when it was, if you will, repopularized, have sort of pushed back against it. And I'm wondering, why do you think that's so, Nefertiti?
It's
I'm
interesting.
going to return to calling people by their first name.
No, that is perfectly fine. It's interesting because I think about what you said, Kim, the fact that it's a moving target, right, when you think about DEI. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, summer of 2020, everyone was home. We were all faced with, you know, seeing this. We were faced with seeing the inequities in ways that we hadn't in the past. And everyone said, okay, we're going to fix it. And the reality is that DEI is dynamic. It's constantly changing. You said it best. It's not just race or ethnicity. It's disability. It's ability. It's all these different factors that are never going to end. So I think what happened, at least one reason why we feel like we've stalled when thinking about DEI is that people sort of set goals and felt like they were going to accomplish it and be done and move on. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that you can be done and move on from. It's something that will live forever in your institution and organization, similarly to your budget and your human resources and other aspects of the business.
And the pushback seems it's politicized.
Yeah.
But it also seems to be something that individuals have long resisted, if you will. Anouska, when you think about this issue and you think about this pushback, companies in 2020, you think about June of 2020, immediately after the George Floyd murder, you saw ads appearing in newspapers around the country. Yeah. 57% of companies pledged to basically create DEI programs that were substantive. Mm-hmm. The pushback, again, it's not just been among corporations, but individuals as well. Why do you think that's so?
Well, DEI requires change. Change requires holding up the mirror to yourself. And if you haven't had practice at holding up the mirror to yourself, you might be a little bit upset by what you see. I think that's where there's been a lot of pushback, is the idea that institutions don't just change and the people get to stay the same, right? Institutions are made up of people, and so the people have to also be willing to engage in more equitable behaviors. That requires you looking at yourself and thinking, okay, what can I do better? And that's a much larger, long-term journey, back to your idea, Kim, rather than a sort of one-off checkpoint that you can say, great, we're going to have a company retreat, and by the end of this week, no one's going to be racist, right? That's just not what's going to happen. It does require you to really look at yourself and think, what can I do differently in how I engage with others, especially others who have identities different from my own. It's not about prioritizing just where I experience marginalization, but where do other people experience inequity, and how am I part of the solution long term? How is this a thing that I can audit for myself regularly, rather than saying, great, I've taken a course, so now I have the certificate, I have a badge on my social media that says I'm all set, I can move on to the next thing.
But this pushback, if you will, this reactionary trend that we're seeing around the country, enunciated by people like DeSantis in Florida and Greg Abbott in Texas, who are pushing back against DEI, not just pushing back, but instituting executive orders, basically trying to stop DEI. You hear a lot of folks saying, well, maybe DEI has gone too far. We have a situation in East Hampton, Massachusetts, that's been talked about in the newspapers this week, where a superintendent, an offer apparently was rescinded because you live in East Hampton, where an offer was rescinded because he used the term ladies. The question for many people, and I'm not playing devil's advocate here, this is a real question, has it gone too far?
I don't think so at all. I think we've only just started to scratch the surface, and that is why I believe, and I know my colleagues here do as well, that's why we're seeing pushback. Because as you just said, this takes, as all of you have said, this takes change and it takes sustained work. And I think a lot of people, especially in June 2020 and beyond into 2021, thought, okay, I'll take that course, I'll take the training, I'll check the box, and then my work is done. But what we talk about a lot as DEI practitioners is that the work is a marathon. And what I like to add into that is that the marathon doesn't have an end point, so there is no finish line. And that reality is very hard to internalize and accept for people who are new to the work, because they're like, oh, I'm tired, this is hard work. But for those of us who have marginalized identities, who are, part of these systemic oppressions, we know that already, and it's about bringing people into that realization. So you mentioned East Hampton, right, and we don't know all of the factors, which I think is a complicating issue around that situation. But what the narrative right now is that this superintendent received a job offer, he was negotiating, and he claims that he wrote in an email and addressed two of the school committee members by ladies. And they said, well, that's a microaggression and you should know better as an educator, so we're rescinding your job offer. That's not the whole story, but that is part of the story that we have from the superintendent, who is a white man. And he's used this as a lightning rod topic to really catapult himself into, at this point, national news. And my thing is that there are microaggressions that come up in all sorts of shapes and sizes and forms. So from my perspective, it very well could have been a microaggression. We just don't know because we don't have further context. And context is a really big piece of this. So is that the reason why he had his job offer rescinded? I can't say for sure. Is it something that may have happened? Possibly. Could it have been a microaggression? Possibly. But it's complicated.
And we're seeing, of course, all over this example, and we're seeing all over the Commonwealth. In Worcester, for example, I think we have a number of other places. Worcester, we have Lowell, we have Natick, Pembroke, where DEI officials, officers have stepped down, moved away from the job because they find that they are not supported. Chime in here. This support that we're talking about, how can it work if there's no commitment, if you will? And the assumption here in these particular municipalities is that they aren't supported. Kim, your view?
So I will say that over the last 2 years, I've placed quite a few inaugural diversity officers. And organizations have to be clear on where they are in their journey and communicating that out to candidates when they take roles. I have come across quite a few people who have been in roles that they've come back and said that it's not as advertised.
It's not as advertised.
Not as advertised. So what I often tell candidates is it's very important that you get a clear view of what you're walking into, ask all the right questions to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what you're taking on. Ask about budgets, ask about the reporting structure, ask about the genesis of the role. Why is the role necessary? Find out what the barriers are, but you need to get all of that information before walking into the role, because this role is disruptive. The whole idea of a DEI role is disruptive. You're removing barriers. You're working in a system that is not set up for you. It's set up for you. You are walking in to dismantle it. So in order to do that, you need energy, you need support, you need a budget.
And you have to have real, as you said, real commitment.
Yes.
There was a 2020 review of about 400 studies, which basically concluded that DEI for many organizations was not effective. And for some of the very reasons that you're talking about. Let's go around. That effectiveness, for something to be effective, it's not just a question of commitment, but you have to have individuals, of course, who want to change.
Yeah.
But you have a lot of people from the very beginning who say, I am not interested in this issue, or who are brought into it screaming. If they're brought into it screaming, is there any point of continuing to implement this type of program?
I mean, I think if it's coercive, it's never going to be sustainable change, right? And I think that was one of the earlier issues, is that some folks thought DEI is about those people over there. It's not about me, right? I don't need to do anything. It's about those people. It's about people who have different identities from me. You know, I don't have to do anything. I don't have a place there. And actually, it's about everyone, right? DEI literally has the word inclusion in it, right? The E stands for equity, not exclusion. It does need to involve everyone. And I think a lot of these earlier roles that were developed in various organizations, it was almost like, we're going to have a chief diversity officer, so now no one else needs to worry about that stuff, right? We're all absolved of this. And all of a sudden, these CDOs, these other roles, were saying, no, we've all got to get involved. And that felt really uncomfortable, because it was like, well, who is this new person in my organization who's telling me what to do? And maybe they do or don't have influence, but I certainly don't want to have to change anything about how I've been engaging in this workplace. For some folks, they'd been at that workplace for decades, and no one had ever given them the kind of feedback that they were getting in these DEI initiatives. So it felt really uncomfortable, it felt sudden, and quite frankly, it felt like this is a new thing that's been imposed on me. If you don't have buy-in, if you don't see how white supremacy impacts us all, yes, white people included. Patriarchy impacts us all, yes, including people who identify as cis men, then you're never going to change in ways that are sustainable, because you're only invested in benefiting from the inequity rather than actually understanding that the entire system is adversely impacting us all.
I see you agree with that.
I absolutely agree with it. I am over here amening.
I felt the virtual high
Yes, the virtual high five. I agree, because when I think about UMass, for example, and the difference between the organizations who have been successful and progressing towards their DEI goals are the ones who have embedded DEI into the fabric of who they are, into the fabric of the positions that they have in existence, and not made it something adjacent to leadership, adjacent to the organizational goals. So for instance, at UMass Amherst, all of our leaders have DEI goals and they set DEI priorities. It's not just me as the Chief Diversity Officer who's saying, hey, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to do it. It's those folks who are leading their various academic departments, their various schools or colleges, who have worked with me sometimes, but also on their own to develop these goals and these priorities related to DEI.
That means you're working directly with the president and the
Absolutely.
Deans?
Yeah, so working with in fact, working with the president of the UMass system, who recently just promoted me to a position. And this position is interesting because, again, it's not having DEI be adjacent to the leadership roles. It's actually promoting me to a position that oversees academic and student affairs for the entire UMass system, as well as equity. So it's really embedding equity into the very fabric of who we are as an institution.
Don't you find it somewhat remarkable, given the jobs that you do, all of you do, that here you have 2020, George Floyd, people reacting to that, folks making commitments to fight racism, to fight gender bias, all forms of inequality. And you have a situation when you actually have politicians running around the country today, including here in Massachusetts, running on a platform specifically against DEI, as we saw in a Braintree school election. With that in mind, when the fact that we aren't in 2020 and we're in 2023, a whole different reality, Felicia. How do you basically deal with the impact of a situation where folks have actually are campaigning against DEI actively?
It's challenging, for sure. I think so. What my company, we're a consulting company. We do a lot of DEI coaching, consulting, and training with corporations and institutions in the U.S. as well as internationally. And what I think is, whether you're someone who works at one of these organizations, whether you're living in a town where someone's running on this campaign, whether you're hunting for a new job, whatever your role is, that's a message to you. So if you're living in Braintree, that person who is running on that anti-DEI campaign, in my mind, is saying the quiet parts out loud. And that's actually really helpful, right? Because for a long time, we tamped it down. And, for a long time here in the US as well, like, we thought we had solved everything. We're in this post-racial world, everything is amazing. And the reality is, it's not like that at all. We have very deep issues. So I actually look at it as almost a benefit, because it is a loud and clear signal to me that this person does not align with my values, my beliefs, or my commitments. That being said, I think especially when we veer into leadership and politicians, it's very dangerous. And so I think that it just is another symbol of this. It's not just resistance, it's really this deep fear that, and I'll name it, a lot of white men, a lot of people who have power and privilege are very afraid of losing what they have gotten. And, there's a lot of times we talk about, well, if, we're talking about equity, and there's analogies to equities like the pie. And I think what people are afraid of is losing the benefits that they have gotten from oppressing others. And the reality is, we can all have a part of the pie, but some of us will have to have smaller pieces. And what we're seeing is these people who are saying, no, I don't want a smaller piece. I want the whole thing or nothing. And that is something that is it's going to be really hard to shift, because it's tapping into a lot of this fear that people all over the country have. And that resistance is going to be very challenging to overcome, because it's not something you can overcome with a training, with reading a book, with listening to a podcast, with watching this discussion right here, right? We're not going to solve it all here, unfortunately. I really wish we could, but it is going to take that long, sustained work, and that's what is a challenge.
Long, sustained work, indeed. Kim, you've been at this for a long time. You've looked at the DEI in the context of the military and the Navy, I understand. You've looked at it on other planes, education, municipalities, so on and so forth. What is it going to take to win some type of broad acceptance, if you will, of DEI? Because there is right now broad resistance, again, articulated by people like DeSantis and Greg Abbott of Texas and others.
It's complicated. It's so complicated. I think what I'm energized by is the fact that we're having these conversations, because in my 20s and 30s, we weren't having these conversations. We weren't addressing, our language changed after George Floyd. I never in my life used language like white fragility and white supremacy. We didn't use those terms. Now my white colleagues use those terms. So the fact that we're calling it out, and I like what you just said about politicians saying these things, saying the quiet parts out loud, because you're right, those quiet parts out loud now tell me who you are. Whereas before, I didn't know who you were stealth. So the fact that we're having these conversations now, those blind spots are not so blind. So that is the beginning. So I think when we continue having the conversations, we can start pushing the envelope and we can start learning, because I think those uncomfortable conversations are where the learning takes place. And I'll give you an example of something that happened with us at my job. We were doing an exercise, just reviewing resumes and kind of deciding who we were going to hire from a bias exercise. And we looked at a resume that had Alpha Phi Alpha sorority listed on it.
Okay.
So about a third of the group on this Zoom call were black managing directors and associates. So we dismissed it and said, well, we're not calling this person in because they lied. So we flagged it immediately. That doesn't exist, right? Well, our white colleagues were like, well, why would you say that? That could be a small sorority that you've never heard of. And then we were like, no, it doesn't exist, and we moved on. And so I said, wait, here's a teachable moment. Let's hold off for a minute. So let's back up and take a moment to teach people who don't understand the Divine Nine. So no, you may have been
who don't understand sorority and fraternity culture
when it comes to people of color,
that's
right?
Right.
So that comment was made from her lens, because she said, I was in a sorority that no one had ever heard of. It could because it was a small sorority. So let me explain to you. We only have 9. That's it. Just
right.
9.
So you were able to cut through the, if you will, the nonsense.
Right.
Well,
So those are blind spots
Right.
that if you're not having those conversations, there's not an opportunity for somebody to stop and go, wait, what?
It raises the question about broadening DEI goals and definitions. We have a few minutes left, and I'd like to just go around and talk about the next challenges. Broadening DEI, making it more such that it's acceptable to more people. Some people will never buy in, but you want other people to buy in. So Anouska, starting with you, what are the next challenges? How do you basically expand this? And I'll throw in another question. How do you keep people from, if you will, warring with each other over that piece of pie?
Yeah. I'll answer the second question first. I think we can be warring over the piece of pie in the short term, but long term we get to control the bakery, right? And so folks who are really short term about what they're losing out now are failing to see actually what we're going to achieve long term. So in terms of the next challenge, it is really about breaking down the idea that DEI is this like new limb that you have to grow, this new set of strategies, new language that we can like weaponize against each other, that makes people feel like they're excluded. It is about us feeling like we belong in any space, and there are so many different strategies that we can employ individually, but also as organizations, as workplaces, right? That it doesn't have to just be a special initiative. Yes, you should be hiring CDOs like my colleague over here, but you need to be thinking about this as a technology for your workplace. And just like you would uplift like an operation system in your workplace and regularly audit it and make sure everyone has the training they need. It's about us being able to be together. It's not about creating individual silos.
Yeah. So Nefertiti, your thought?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when I think about the future of this work and how we can move it forward, it's really sort of moving towards systems and processes and policies. I think we spent a lot of time thinking about the individual person and trying to change individual people. And I try to spend my time and try to really advise the folks that I'm working with to spend their time shifting policies, procedures, and processes so that they become more inclusive. Because if we keep them the same, they will produce the same results over and over.
Yeah, and Felicia?
I think 2 things. First, to that point around resistance, I'm still a big believer in not just meeting people where they're at, but also bringing them to where I think they should be, or where they could be further in their journey, and that takes a lot of sustained work. And second, I think we're going to just see a continuation of expansion of the lens, because we have been very focused, for all the right reasons, on race and ethnicity, especially in the last couple years. But now we're starting to really broaden the conversation for disability. Gender has long been in the discussion as well, but just really looking at the full range of what we're talking about when we're talking about this.
Kim, last words?
Just
30
an
seconds?
exclamation point behind organizational change and making sure that organizations are ready to support people of difference.
Excellent. This is a complex topic, and we'll talk about it more, of course, on Facebook and beyond. And I want to thank you. This is incredible. And I'm also curious, and you can think about this too, the next steps that occur nationally, 2024. DEI will be part of the election of 2024, without question. Folks, that's the end of our broadcast and the end of our show. Thank you for joining us. Now stay with us as we continue our conversation on our digital platforms, YouTube and Facebook. I'm Philip Martin, Senior Investigative Reporter, GBH News Center for Investigative Reporting. You're on YouTube and Facebook with our post show continuing our discussion on DEI. One of the issues, of course, that we were just talking about in between programs is universities. The fact that on universities you find also a lot of resistance, and perhaps no greater message of resistance than what happened at Penn State, where there was a commitment to DEI, and then the president of the university said, nope, we're going to do it a different way. What kind of message did that send to the students, to the professors, to the entire community, Nefertiti?
You know, universities are interesting because Penn State and the really big institutions are like they're mini cities, right? They're 30,000, right. 40,000, 50,000 people in this small space. They're a microcosm of what's happening outside, and a lot of times these presidents and chancellors are in some way CEOs and mayors and politicians in their own right. So they're really charged with making really tough decisions. You know, in this particular case, it sends a very strong message that I think we're all aware of, in that in this particular case, perhaps they aren't willing to stand strong in the beliefs of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that's something that these leaders have to do every single day. They have to stand strong in their stance in supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion, which means making very difficult, often politicized decisions like the one that we saw. But
I also think about it, in addition to that, the type of message you're sending to students. Mm-hmm. And a lot of professors may already be resistant, but the message to students is particularly important. What do you think, Felicia?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Penn State especially, part of the backlash, I would say, in our space, in our community, is because the center, I believe it's an anti-racist center that they had committed to building, was already underway. Mm-hmm. So this is not like it was a line item on a budget that got slashed. It was something that was in the works. They were recruiting for ahead of it. It was in progress. And I think especially for students, that sends a clear message that, oh, we can take this away from you anytime we want to. And especially in a university, and of course, my only experience really is having gone to college, but from, if I can remember those days, it sends a message around the power differences that are at play. And I think it's very interesting because unlike a company where, you know, there is different considerations, students are paying to be there. they're not being paid to attend college for the most part, and they're spending lots of money and then being told, well, we don't even care about your voice. And I know it's not just the students, there's also faculty, there's all sorts of other communities of people who are part of this conversation in that space.
You work in STEM, right?
I like to say tech adjacent.
Right.
Yes.
And so in that area where it is competitive, or where it is, some would say, beyond competitive, cutthroat, because everyone wants to get there. How do you basically keep people from, I think the term I used before, warring with each other over perceived injustices, the feeling that their community might be more at a disadvantage than other communities, and believing that it's not enough emphasis placed on that particular community, where you have Black folks competing with Latino folks competing with Asian folks, so on and so forth. How do you prevent that type of thing in the context of your work?
That's where education is so critical, because as practitioners, we know that that's a device that has been set up by our white supremacy culture, right? That's the distraction, is to get the marginalized groups to fight with each other over the scraps. The real issue is the systemic underpinnings of it, which is that all of those groups are at a disadvantage. And so when we're talking about, whether it's Black people, disabled people, Asian people, whatever the marginalization identity is, we shouldn't be fighting with each other. We should be really trying to push back against the underpinnings of the culture that we all live in the society. So I think that that education piece is critical, as I said, because unless we understand that, we are going to default into that warring, because that's a comfortable place for us to be, because it's very visible, it's very immediate, and it gets at us as individuals. And so if I'm looking at this Center for Anti-Racist Research, I'm thinking, oh, well, why isn't this a Center for Disability Studies, which is more personal to me, perhaps? But the reality is that a step forward in one space is going to ultimately be a step forward for everybody, as long as we don't devolve into this clash.
Phillip, could I comment on that as well? It's interesting too, because there's this perception that there's this oppression Olympics happening, right? Where people are like fighting and warring. And my experiences working on a college campus and on multiple college campuses, that isn't really the case, where students and faculty and staff and our community members, if they're fighting for disability rights, they're not upset at the anti-racism movement on campus, right? A lot of times they're joining. So I think sometimes that narrative is perpetuated by those who are looking to undermine all of it. Right, the ones who are looking to undermine the anti-racism movement, they're looking to undermine, the pro-disability ability activism, because I just don't see it.
And the related affirmative action.
I don't see the warring that we've politicized and that we hear about in the media on the ground.
What you're just pointing out is so important, because I think we also have to look at what, if you will, some of these extraordinary developments that have occurred since 2020. Kim, your point was absolutely right. Even the term white fragility, the language that we use is so different. BIPOC, though that term might have existed before, it is popularized. And let's talk about some of those changes for good, as it's perceived, that have occurred since 2020. Anouska, the BIPOC, as you see it, but also trans rights, and also let's throw in the rights of differently abled people, so on and so forth. How is that nexus being, if you will, created and being perpetuated in beyond campuses, beyond the universities, but in our cities and towns, and in the context of DEI?
Yeah, I mean, here's what did change in the sort of the 2020 reckoning, was that we all suddenly had space and time to identify what our needs were, and it started occurring in the sort of more grassroots way, right? The reason why that sort of coalition building that you were speaking about on campuses is occurring is because of folks at the grassroots level saying, hang on a second, If I am not getting what I need, and my neighbor over here is not getting what they need, then instead of us warring against each other, we actually have a lot more power and influence when we combine in a more intersectional way. Because that's the other piece that often gets sort of misunderstood in these larger politicized narratives, is that somehow talking about race means we're not talking about gender. Somehow talking about gender means we're not talking about disability, that we're not talking about trans rights. Actually, we all have these intersectional identities. My experience of my womanhood is inherently racialized. So having the language of BIPOC, having the language of coalition building, having the language to say, this is what I need, allows me to make so many more connections and has allowed a lot of us to actually get a lot more sort of a headway in some of the needs that need to be addressed. No, the systemic changes still need to occur, but in terms of what's happening at the grassroots up, that's been a really exciting thing to see. Social media, for example, being a plethora, a vast archive of people's experiences, and they're talking to each other rather than just feeling like the narrative is between the people who have and the people who don't have.
So how do we get rid of the fear? How do we get rid of the zero-sum assumptions about DEI? If I'm being advantaged, that means that the argument, as the argument goes, then they are being disadvantaged. Or if I'm being disadvantaged, you're being advantaged, and therefore it's problematic. What do you think?
Well, it took 400 years to build it. So it'll take time. It'll take time. This is baby steps, and it is a journey, and it takes lots of energy. The work is hard, and the work is personal.
Personal.
But it is very, very, very personal. You know, as you're talking, Anouska, think about that whole intersectionality that we all started to talk about and realize more after the George Floyd murder. And we started to realize that we're very complicated. We're all very complicated. And and we're talking about it more. It's a journey.
If the summer of 2020 was a summer of reckoning, what is the summer of 2023 in this context?
It's so tricky to say. I'm laughing because I honestly don't have a good answer.
Yeah.
I think, 2020 into 2021 into the beginning of 2022, I think we saw a lot of good work, a lot of conversation, a lot of commitments. But we have started to see pullback. We've started to see a lot more resistance. A lot of DEI roles have been starting to be part of these layoffs, and folks who had these titles are being let go, sometimes en masse. And I really think that right now, summer 2023, I think it's going to be a moment for all of us, whether we are in the work already or if we're just in the society, to take a beat and reconsider. Because you mentioned it yourself, Phillip, we have 2024 elections coming up, right?
That's right.
I know I'm personally keeping a very close eye on that. I'm very worried about some things that are happening in places around the country, in Massachusetts as well. And if certain people continue to rise in power, that's going to be a big deal for us. I was spending last night actually watching some of the videos that are coming out of Nashville, with the Nashville 3,
That's right.
the two gentlemen who just got expelled.
From the legislature.
And it's frightening. It's really frightening because this is getting at the roots of our democracy. It's getting at personal rights. It's getting at a lot. So I think this summer, for me at least, in my work and with the work that my company does, we're really trying to figure out how can we take care of ourselves? How can we rest? How can we rejuvenate so that we keep doing the work? Because I think it's going to be even more critical this year, next year, and beyond. And that's always been the case, right? We've never had a moment where we've been like, great, let's all take the summer off and take vacation. Right. But unfortunately, I think this summer is going to have to be about that balancing of what do I need so that I can continue to do this work.
And Nefertiti, how do you, same question.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's going to be balancing, taking care of yourself. But I also think for me, it's preparing the institutions that we work for, the institutions that we support for the highly contentious political environment of 2024, and the ways that DEI and all sort of the adjacent aspects and concepts related to DEI will be politicized. That's sort of what's front of mind for me, is thinking about how is that going to impact our institutions, our students, because it's going to be on the front page of most of these various elections, and the most important one, at least for our country, the presidential election. DEI will be front and center, and how will we react to that? How will we manage that? Because we do have to manage the outcry from folks in our institutions about, okay, how do we align with this? Because there's now this idea that DEI is political. And in my opinions, everything is political, so we'll start there. But also, it's human. Diversity, it's the most human part of of people, of beings, of animals, of the world, right, is the diversity of it. And you think about inclusion and the sense of belonging, this sort of innate need that we all have. As soon as we're born, we have this need to belong. So, to me, these things are just so human, and to have them politicized is so unfortunate, but it's also the reality of folks who have been living these lives with marginalized identities. We've always been politicized. We've always had to think of ourselves, our work, and our being as political.
Anouska, what do you think?
I will say that this summer may be an opportunity in trying to rest and rejuvenate to start prioritizing data more in DEI, right? That I think for a long time, especially because of the emotional outpouring that occurred in 2020, it was easy for folks to think that DEI is just a feelings thing. And to your point about it being human and personal, that doesn't mean we don't have data for it. In fact, the data is deeply personal. How we count who is present is going to be so important when we're thinking about who is voting, right? But also when we're thinking about what does it mean to push DEI initiatives forward. This isn't just a feeling of belonging. There are metrics that many organizations, my organization included, have been developing that can actually tell you if you are on track or not. So I think this summer is also an opportunity for us to say, what are the tools, what's the data and the evidence that we have, so that we don't always have to be yelling about it in order for the progress to occur, because that will lead to us burning out. But actually, let's let the data, the metrics, speak for where we are as institutions, as a country, so that we can set some really clear goals to work forward through the next term.
Incredible. And Kim, that question for you, if the summer of 2020 was a summer of reckoning, the summer of 2023, in your view, what is it?
Well, I think there's some truth that we're learning. The data point, I think, is very important, because now we do have data, and we're learning how to use that data and how to create more data from it. The other piece of it for me is a learning and a moment of pause, because 3 years later, right, we can reflect and look around, because those DEI roles were the most popular roles out there for 2 years running. And now 33% of those roles have disappeared. So for me, in my job, I like to look and see who's still standing, what organizations are still standing behind their commitment for the work, for the real work.
So we corral the data, we look at the headlines, those, for example, that are state after state after state militating against trans people. We see a situation where municipalities, even in Massachusetts, are not prioritizing DEI, in fact, laying off, and people are quitting. It seems like quite a challenge and quite a contrast to 2020. Next steps that, as we wind this down, that we can take, that basically looks at this notion of inclusion and makes it more inclusive. Trans people still seem to be on the outside of a lot of these discussions, by the way. You still see black women have not basically received the type of job security that was sort of promised, if you will, or hinted at least in 2020. How do we basically corral all of this, knowing what the challenges are, and knowing what the realities are with DEI, and where we are as a nation in terms of resistance. We'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think to your point around data, I think that's going to be a really important piece of it because, as you said, Kim, we've lost so many of these jobs, right? But there are still people out there doing the work. We're still here. There are many others out there, even just grassroots on the ground. I'm always amazed when I look on Facebook, which still exists, and especially for local governance and local organizing. I love seeing my neighbors or friends or colleagues who are the ones jumping in to push back and correct the course when these narratives are coming out that are dangerous. So it doesn't always have to be me or my fellow DEI practitioners. But what I have come to say in my work, especially I work primarily with corporate clients, is I'm done with telling you or try to convince you about the business case for DEI because we've proven it. We already know. Yeah. There's a massive amount of data out there. I don't want to be proving this anymore. For me, at this point, the data needs to be how are you getting better in your journey, not about should you be doing this. And so just to your point, Kim, and to what everyone else has been saying and what we've talked about already, those companies that are now either letting their staff go or de-emphasizing this or pushing back, they're the ones that ultimately I know are not for me or I don't want to spend my energy on helping them until and unless they're ready. So I think really to answer your question, Phillip, it's about regrouping, figuring out, okay, what is that data? What is the story that's coming out? And it's not sometimes always the story that we think it's going to be, right? That's the beauty of data. It exists there, and then we get to interpret it and understand what it's telling us. And so, it's complicated. Like, even in my own company, we're a small company, but we practice what we preach. And it is hard to reckon that sometimes, where as a co-CEO and a co-founder, I hear from my team, and I'm like, well, I don't agree with this, but I have to put my personal feelings aside sometimes and be objective, because if I want my company to grow and if I want to leverage diversity, equity, inclusion, and if I want to be able to have the wherewithal to go into my corporate client spaces and say, I get it, it's hard, we haven't figured it all out ourselves, then we have to do that, right? And so that's going to be a big part of it.
That's going to be a big part of it. And again, Nefertiti, your view.
I think, thinking about the future and thinking about where we are today, the world is only becoming smaller, right? This idea of globalization is like, it's old speak now. How can you possibly be prepared for this sort of economy if you're thinking about, you have these separatist ideals about not being inclusive and not being diverse? Like, it's impossible, right? Like, these two things don't align with each other. So in my opinion, I really see what's happening now as good. The backlash is necessary. We saw it in Reconstruction, right? We've seen this over and over in our history, just as living in the United States, but beyond. We've seen this backlash to progress.
We saw it in Tennessee.
We saw it in Tennessee. We saw it, when Obama became, we've seen this over and over and over again, this sort of backlash to progress. If there was no backlash, I would be surprised and I would be worried. We'd be doing things in a way that aligned with people that want to keep things the way they've always been, and that's not true to the folks that are doing DEI work. So losing those positions, 33%, that's terrible, right? But I am hopeful that the work will be aligned elsewhere. I'm hopeful that the work isn't just falling to the wayside. I'm hopeful that people are continuing to do the work, that the positions will come back, if not, and that we're going to continue to move forward. I have to be hopeful because I do this work, right? But also I think I'm hopeful because we've never been as progressive as a country as we are today. And I think we have to remember that. Sometimes we forget and we're like, things are terrible. It's never been this bad. The reality is that it's never been this good for a lot of people. 2
steps forward.
Exactly, exactly.
Right. Kim, and that same question about the challenges and the progress, but also want to add this. You also have a situation where you have the added situation where some who are describing DEI as racism, and they quote Martin Luther King in order to prove their point, at least that part of Martin Luther King where he says the content of our character. That must be an exhausting situation for you. But how do you view that?
Well, in order for racism to be reversed, racism has to be owned by a race, which it is not. So I don't buy into the reverse racism piece at all. And I think that's, I think the conversation, I'll go back to the conversation. We have to keep talking. We have to keep talking, and I'm one of those people who believes not necessarily the glass is half full or the glass is half empty, because I think people are missing the point. The glass is refillable. So I'm like, just keep the conversation going, because we can find some place in the middle. I think people who are having those conversations about DEI is the devil are not understanding exactly what DEI is. People who are saying, I've worked hard for everything I have, are not understanding what DEI is. They're not getting it. So the conversation needs to continue to take place.
I love you saying the glass is half Phillip. Oh, that's phenomenal. Anouska, you have the last word.
Oh gosh, I'd say again to your point that this is an ongoing journey, and we're going to make mistakes, right? To your point about backlash, that means we tried something, and maybe it didn't resonate with everyone, but maybe it taught us that there is something else that we can be doing. The worst thing that we can do is be so scared of making mistakes that we do nothing. That's how we get 400 years of the same system over and over again. So I would encourage anyone who's even watching this show, rather than thinking, I need to read a full list of books before I change my behavior. Yes, still read those books, they're great, but don't be so afraid of creating change that you do nothing, because inaction is the only enemy that we all need to be scared of.
Well stated. And the testament to the power of what you do collectively is that you are all standing.
Yeah.
And the collective, another, I guess, observation is that you have things like the Anti-Racism Center at Boston University, and we have a very strong DEI program here at GBH. I want to thank all of you for being with us today. Felicia, thank you very much. Anouska, thank you very much. Nefertiti, Kim, my appreciation. Thank you.